After Jim Schwartz interviewed for the Browns head coaching job, listen closely to how the organization talked about him. Not what they praised, but what they avoided committing to. Because that difference tells you more than praise ever could.
Why can't you shed light on what's going to happen with Jim now?
Well, those conversations are ongoing. We'll talk about that at a later day. Today is to introduce Todd Monkin as new head coach.
Imagine Jim Schwartz walking back into the building as defensive coordinator, now working under Todd Monkin as head coach. This comes after players publicly said Schwartz should have been the head coach. Every meeting now carries an unspoken comparison. And that's the tension most people sense, but rarely articulate. Here's the distinction that matters. Praise looks backward. Commitment shapes the future. And organizations are very careful not to confuse the two after leadership decisions. When Browns leadership spoke during and after the head coach hiring process, the emphasis stayed on thoroughness, deliberation, and process. Praise for Jim Schwartz was consistently framed around past performance, while forward-looking commitment was avoided. That framing wasn't accidental. It preserved flexibility. Listen closely to how Browns leadership talked about Jim Schwartz during this period.
So first with Jim, Jim's an outstanding football coach. We have a lot of respect for him, a lot of appreciation for him, and he has certainly earned the right for consideration, but that's something that we still have to discuss and obviously discuss with him.
Jim Schwartz be a candidate for the head coach?
We haven't looked at that yet. I would say this, we think a lot of Jim Schwartz.
That's appreciation, but it's also carefully contained. Process language creates distance without disrespect. It honors what someone has done while preserving options moving forward. In moments like this, that restraint helps organizations avoid binding themselves to outcomes they may not be able to sustain. Inside the locker room, the framing shifted. Star defensive player Denzel Ward openly said he wanted Jim Schwartz to be the head coach and hoped the team wouldn't let him go. That language isn't about process, it's about alignment.
Me personally, I have so much love and respect for Coach Schwartz. I would highly recommend Coach Schwartz for a head coaching job here. Definitely, like I said, Coach Schwartz, he's a great coach.
Talk to teammates about the possibility of Jim Schwartz as head coach, and do you think it's a popular opinion what you're saying about him in this locker room?
I believe so, but ultimately it's not my decision. I'm not the one that signs the checks and does all these things. I just give my input, and you could take it or leave it. But like I said, I got much respect for Coach Schwartz.
That endorsement reveals how leadership is experienced from the inside and how it's managed from the top. When players publicly validate a leader who isn't chosen, authority doesn't disappear. It lingers. And lingering authority creates quiet comparison, not open conflict. Think about it. If Schwartz returns as defensive coordinator, he isn't returning as the same person from before the head coach hiring process. Every success and failure gets reinterpreted through what just happened. That internal residue doesn't stay contained, and clarity starts to erode. Now imagine next season Schwartz is back as defensive coordinator, and the Browns open 2-4. The offense stalls. The head coach is under scrutiny. In that moment, is the locker room fully aligned, or does Todd Monkin feel the weight of players who publicly back someone else for the top job?
You could say whatever you want. You could call him a baby. You could say they don't need him. Here's something that I don't think, if you're being fair, nobody can disagree with. The Browns would have been better off if Jim Schwartz had not been angry and he had just stayed as the defensive coordinator.
Yeah.
Yes.
There's no way to deny that.
Yeah.
So don't make excuses. You can kill them all you want. Don't pretend this doesn't matter at all after 3 years of saying it was the best hire that the Browns have ever made.
When media voices and fans say the team would have been better off bringing Jim Schwartz back as defensive coordinator, they're evaluating continuity through last season's defensive performance. Organizations don't operate on snapshots. They operate on dynamics. A head coach leadership change reshapes alignment, culture, and authority. And you can't assume last year's defensive results will automatically carry over into a different environment. What fans often overlook is that a leadership decision at the head coach level changes people and it changes environments. You don't get to rewind the organization to last season and expect everything else to stay the same. And if you're Jimmy Haslam and the Browns ownership group, there are no guarantees you'd be getting the same Jim Schwartz or the same defensive dynamic under a different head coach. And there's real risk that bringing him back could introduce division inside the locker room. Press conference language doesn't just describe belief, it reflects positioning. The Browns praised Jim Schwartz publicly, but they didn't release him from his contract. and not releasing someone isn't the same thing as committing to them long term in that role. So when he ultimately resigned, was that unexpected, or was that always one possible outcome? Tell me what you think. This is Press Room Breakdown, where we slow the room down and study how the message gets made.